Ladies and gentlemen, this is David Mirikitani with another episode of Weighing In, brought to you by USA Wrestling, the national governing body for wrestling in the United States, and by Nike Wrestling. Go to athleteps.com for all of your Nike and USA Wrestling branded gear. Joined by my good friend, Grant Turner. Grant, we have a special guest host today. We're going to try this guy out.
Oh, my God.
Got good credentials. He was a great college coach. Borderline humanitarian from the state of Iowa, Mark Ostrander. Mark, welcome to the show. I almost got it. I almost stuck the landing.
Real funny. Real funny.
You were missed, brother. How are you?
I'm good. Just been busy with work. The railroad, I don't think they care if I have a podcast that I need to be on. They seem to think that their business is more important. So,
yeah. So, to catch people up, we did get your picks for Oklahoma State. We did that. GT and I did that last week. And you and I were remarkably similar. Probably the biggest difference was you had Platt scoring less than I did, and you had Hendrickson scoring a little bit more. But when you added them all up, we were literally a half a point apart. So you came out at 65 points. Just kind of want to give you a moment to kind of tell me and GT and the audience kind of where you think Oklahoma State, because you don't – let me frame it this way, because you and I have done this together longer than Grant has with us. Whenever we did this, we just picked the points at each weight, added them up, like, oh, I guess that's where we think the team is going to be. So did it surprise you were around 64, 65 points? Is that what you thought mentally going into it? And where do you think 65 points will get Oklahoma State next year?
I think they're going to be on the bubble to get a trophy. I think they're going to be right in that group of 6 or 7 teams to get a trophy. I think it's going to be very similar to this year. I think it's going to be Penn State by a huge amount. And then I think it's going to be 5 or 6 teams within 2 or 3 points of each other all the way down to 7th and 8th. So I think Oklahoma State's definitely one of those teams. But I also think Iowa State's going to be one of those teams. I think Ohio State will probably be one of those teams. Iowa, Arizona State. I mean, there's just so many good programs out there right now.
And interrupt real quick. You and I had a conversation this last week. Ohio State's sneaky good, right?
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, GT, right? They bring back Mendez. They bring back Rocco Welsh. They bring back Feldman. They bring back D'Amelio. They get Karchla back, theoretically. And, I mean, the big one would be if they got Sammy Sasso back. I don't think anybody knows that. And they get Tom Ryan off the bench. But if luck runs in streaks, they got a bunch of their bad luck out of the way. So I don't know why I'm not mentioning them when I keep talking about trophy teams, but they got to be in the hunt, right, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, like, put in, like, Bouzakis. I mean, they got – and then they've been, like, in the top – once again, not to quote, but they've had a couple of really touted recruiting classes, like, back-to-back years, like, very, very talented guys going there. So, I mean, you saw that last year with Rocco Welsh's run.
Yeah.
Like – that can happen, like Gavin Hoffman's run from a few years ago.
Yes.
Feldman making a really big jump this year, being kind of an undersized heavyweight. Give him another year to get big.
Yes.
Once again, same thing with Jesse Mendez, national champion.
Yes. So,
I mean, there's a lot of really good things that, they're going to be pretty dang good.
Yeah. So, Mark, I mean, I guess if you had to pick right now, and everybody obviously picking Penn State first, do you have Oklahoma State like it? Give me your top 5.
Oh, see, I don't think any of the lineups are set yet. I have no idea where some of these guys are going. For example, if I wanted to pick Iowa in the top 5, I have to figure out who their lineup's going to be. They have Drake Ayala wrestling 61 kilos this weekend in the U23s. So is it telling me that he's getting too big for 125? Is he going to go up to 133? I mean, there's things that you need to kind of know before you put a number on.
I'm just asking you to make
I know. That's the hard question, though, because I like to be at least
All right,
somewhat
give me your 5 next teams in no particular order.
I think you got Iowa, Arizona State. I think you got Oklahoma State. I think Iowa State's going to be there. So there's your next 4 or 5 teams.
I'm putting Ohio State in that group too.
Yep.
So, GT, anybody different from that crowd that you see?
Well, I mean, like, I think the usual suspects are the usual suspects, especially like with the way that the transfer portal and like the returning teams are.
Yeah.
I think probably one of the ones that I think we don't necessarily think about is maybe Minnesota if Gable comes back.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Salazar came back, right?
Salazar's coming back. They got Cooper Flynn back. You know, they got some points there, right? So, I mean, once again, not to necessarily. I mean, we see like what with one good guy, like Wyatt Henderson when he was at Air Force, like top 20 team. You get a little bit of like help from some other guys. I mean, Isaiah Salazar was a number 2 seed last year. You know, you put like 3, 4, 5 guys on the stand, like all of a sudden you're in medal, trophy contention. But once again, if that happens, that would be another team that I just on the fringe that could potentially make a run.
And you mentioned Cooper Flynn, and that kind of triggered my brain to think about Virginia Tech and North Carolina State in the ACC. Mark's nodding if you're just listening to this, but North Carolina State was seeded to have an unbelievable tournament in March, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. And, Pat Pop's done such a great job with that program. When they finish 10th or 12th, they're disappointed. That's a sign of continued excellence and consistent excellence. And then Virginia Tech's got Henson back, Latona moving up, then Tresca back. I mean, they got some dudes. And TJ Stewart, yeah. NC State brings back Arini and Jack, Arrington, Ed Scott, and the guy that I'm really excited to see come out of redshirt, Trumbull, right, Mark?
At heavyweight, I think he's going to be
an immediate
top tier for sure. So yeah, I think I just think there's so many good teams that are going to just be beating each other up. It's going to be tough to pick this early in the year until you see their lineups where you think they're going to end up, except for Penn State. That's pretty simple. Is David frozen, Grant?
He might be, but
you and I look good.
I think once again, I think for what you're saying is 100% accurate. I think that once again, these are just stabs in the dark. We don't really have a crystal ball to see. And once again, I think there's also where you are able to, like the Shane Van Ness when he went down, and you're talking about Penn State's lineup, and you're like, well, all of a sudden you have Tyler Kasich come in, or you really don't know what's going to happen. All of a sudden that guy has an amazing national tournament run, great season. You just have a lot of different things like that occur, right? And you just didn't know how good that kid could be, or Mitchell Messenbrink, another really good athlete that we all know that he's really talented. We all know that he was really good. It's all about the different things that each team develops over time. And I think one of the things that I think a lot of coaches don't necessarily have that crystal ball for is if they grow or get bigger. We're talking about Trumbull going to heavyweight. We're all going to watch that basically happen in front of our eyes. Okay, well, this guy's, 8 feet tall. Now he's going to go up to heavyweight. Maybe he does cause some problems for people.
He's huge. He's huge too. I mean, his legs are he's just grown so much as an athlete in the last 3 years. I mean, this kid is from Nebraska. Nebraska doesn't usually have these outstanding wrestlers coming out of the state. I mean, they get very few that are podium kids, during their careers at Division I. So it just tells you, Pop's done a great job at North Carolina State, and he has got this kid really going in the right direction. He's going to be a force. He really is.
He was probably one of the most impressive kids at the trials that didn't win. Just his ability to stand there and not get smashed by Snyder and not really be scared of the moment. And, you guys are coaches and athletes, we're athletes as well. and GT, you're still actively coaching, there's a lot of times, like, maybe a kid of yours will go wrestle. Say you have a 125 or 133 pounder and he wrestles at Drake Ayala, since that came up earlier, and he loses to that guy 7-2 or something. And you can see him actually walk off the mat with confidence, and he gets back in the room on Monday, and you're like, this kid's mentally jump levels right now. He believes he can do more than maybe he believed on Friday. So those kind of things really, really matter. And the crazy thing, when we're talking about all these teams, we didn't mention Cornell, we didn't mention Missouri, or perennial top 10 teams. We didn't mention Michigan. So, like, out of all those teams, somebody's going to take 12th, which is kind of bonkers when you just, there's 11 teams there. So I did see, and this was just on Twitter, but GT, maybe you can confirm that Pinheiro is going to get his year of eligibility back, but they're going to make him sit out 2 meets, but he still has 3 years remaining. Pinheiro, if you're watching, I talked to you at Kansas City, want you to come on the pod and talk about it. And that goes to Mark's point of Iowa State. The reason why I haven't just really been super high on Iowa State for next year is I don't know how they're going to sort out that logjam between 33 and 65. I mean, I think the real question is who can go 65 and be effective, right? And GT, it's got to be probably Chittum or Pinheiro, right?
Yeah, that's gonna be a situation. I have no idea how they're gonna fix it.
Jim Tan laundry. What we got here is a situation. So
it's not a bad problem to have, though. I mean, you've got the horses in the room. Just got to plug them in, and they're all talented enough to win matches at whatever weight they're going to go. That's a nice problem to have.
Well, you're right, Mark. But again, you got Frost, then you had Echemendia and Swiderski, and then Chittum. And you probably want to get the other Frost in the lineup, and you probably want to get Pinheiro in the lineup, and somebody has to go 65. That just has to happen. So, yeah, we've got plenty of time to talk about it, but it's just an interesting, like you said, those are first world problems, right?
Yep.
So, also speaking of Iowa State, Evan Bachman from Utah Valley goes there. And then Osmani Diversant from Cuba goes there. So GT and I were talking about this off air. Bachman plugs a hole. I don't think even Iowa State would legitimately say we think he's going to be an All-American. But he makes them a lot better in dual meets. And when I talked to Kevin Dresser, and that podcast should be coming out in the next 7 days, he talked about even though Feldkamp didn't place this year, the points he scored allowed them to place ahead of Iowa and, make the top 4. And sometimes I think, well, hey, if he's not worth 15 points or more, it's not worth talking about. Well, that's not the case. You get a bunch of guys that score 4 and 5 and then a couple bangers. That's another path to get to the podium. Now, Penn State seems to be the only team that has guys that score 10 or more or nothing, basically. So, and then the Cuban, how we all kind of just pick Penn State guys to win in the semis and finals based on track record.
Yeah.
I think we need to assume, Mark and Grant, that he'll probably do pretty well at Iowa State with how they did with Echemendia and Bastida, right?
What weight? I don't even know what weight he is. Do you
25-33, and he does have a freestyle win over Figueroa.
Okay.
So, and it's not like Figueroa is a folk styler that doesn't know how to wrestle freestyle.
So he fits a need that they have right now at 125, if he makes 125.
I would think, Grant, he's probably as good as he's probably better than Tarrakeen on his feet right now if he could beat Figueroa.
Well, this is a great, we could use this as a caveat to talk about international athletes wrestling in collegiate style of wrestling right now, because once again, with the 3-point takedown,
yeah. Yes,
this opens up an entirely different world of understanding how to wrestle collegiate style wrestling. Because once again, if you get a couple of takedowns, you don't have to choose down ever.
Right.
So as far as a need for Iowa State, I think, Terrakina has been kind of the mainstay there. He's been up as high as, top 5. He's been, he's been a very, very good journeyman guy for Iowa State past couple of years. But once again, even if you believe that like he's just either going to push Terrakina or just like learn the game of folk style, I think he's got a lot of time left too. So I think that once again, they've proven to have a really good success rate of like understanding how to like get younger and, Anthony to be able to transition to the folk style game. I mean, they didn't get worse. They got a lot better at those low weight class that will then definitely help out, the Frosts of the world, Swiderski, Pinero, like all the way up, that you basically could have all of those guys working out together. So,
yeah. And the Iowa State thing, like Frost and Grant, like every time I saw your brother, he was talking about Evan Frost for president, because he coached him at Dowling, so, but Frost probably made one of the biggest jumps in the country last year. And so if you give that guy another year and he's got a twin who, from everything you hear, works as hard as he does, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the lineup too. So here's the press release from Iowa State. It says, Kevin Dresser announced the addition of Cuban national Osmani Diverson to the roster on Tuesday. He's an extremely talented, athletic young man. Very good results with our recruiting efforts in Cuba in recent years. Excited to see how he makes the adjustment. He was a 22 junior Pan Am champion. He won 57 kilo. For people who don't know, that's 125.4, 21 and 21 Cuba nationals, and then won the senior division in 2023. In 2021, he beat Richie Figueroa in the semifinals. He also owns victories over Ryan Miller and Jacob Moran. On the senior circuit, he was a bronze 2023 Pan Am and gold at the Central American and Caribbean Games. So I don't know enough to know how those credentials compare to Bastida. And that Chimenea was, at Sunnyside, and that's kind of a whole different conversation. But this guy could be pretty impactful, and on a team where they're in the hodgepodge of 2 through 12, which we've kind of talked about, can make a big difference.
Yep.
Speaking of the hodgepodge of 2 through 12, Cam Amin goes to Oklahoma State. So really interesting to see there if they redshirt, Fish, if what happens there, because right now they got 2 165-pounders in Amin and Fish, and they actually wrestled at nationals. I'm a big Teague Travis fan, but I know him. I know his family. He was in Border Brawl. He's a Missouri kid originally. Spent his first 3 years in Columbia, and then did the Stillwater move for his senior year. But I think he would say he grew up in Missouri. And he won some big matches for them this year. Beat Brock Muller twice. Probably those are his highlight wins, especially since they were from the same high school. But I heard the guys on Flow say that when you watch a mean drill, and GTU probably of the three of us been the most likely to see something like that he's really fast, twitchy, and explosive, and that he just doesn't put himself in a lot of scramble scenarios or just getting a lot of flurries in matches, and that if he did, he'd probably win more than 50% of them. And if Taylor and that staff alone can just get him to kind of open up, pull the trigger, cut it loose, whichever analogy or phrase you want to use, he'd probably be a pretty dangerous guy, and he's a multiple-time All-American. I was saying this to somebody the other day. I have a lot of friends in Stillwater, and I have a friend in Kansas, shout out Kelly Heinecker, who loves Oklahoma State. And he goes, how do you see it? I go, the pessimistic approach is they only have 2 returning All-Americans. That's Platt and Hendrickson. The optimistic approach is they got those 2. Spratley was rounded 12. Amin's All-American before. Hamidi's All-American before. Cale Hughes is sitting in the finals of the U20s. Jordan Williams was a huge recruit. Christian Carroll was a huge recruit. I mean, they got dudes pretty much at every weight. I don't know what they're going to do at 41. I'm hearing Jameson thinks he's too big, but they got 8 or 9 guys that, based on high school credentials, should eventually be college All-Americans. So, Mark, you know me. I'm not a big believer in the 6th-year guys and the transfers, and I get that there's exceptions, but I think it goes more the Michael DiAugustino way than it goes the Shane Griffith way. So what are your thoughts on Cam?
I think Cam is a good fit for the program. I think what David Taylor might be able to do with him could be impressive. We know he's good enough to be an All-American. He's done it before. He's beaten some of the best kids in the country. He knows how to wrestle close. He's good at that. If he opens up and can score some points, how hard is he going to be to beat? I would say pretty difficult to beat. So I think you just got to get that out of him. And, I mean, if David Taylor can do it, a lot of people think David Taylor can do, this Oklahoma State team's going to be really, really good because they're borderline All-Americans at 5 different weights.
Yeah.
And if they can get them over the hump, they could have eight All-Americans, David. They're that talented.
Yeah, that was his thing, Mark, and GT, like you and me talked about it, like they had a bunch of bubble dudes, right? And
Yep.
You make your money on the bubble, right? Like the bubble on the front, which is the quarterfinal round, the round of 12 blood round on the background, like that's Spratley, right? Like he loses an overtime match to Ayala, who then goes on and makes the finals. And then Spratley loses to Tanner Jordan. And these guys were 2 coin flip matches. I mean, I get that Ayala won both of them. I'm not trying to – I don't care. Like, I don't know either one of the kids personally. But, you know, if we have an overtime match twice, we're probably pretty freaking even. And then one kid punches through to the finals and scores 16 plus bonus, and the other kid scores 2. If you switch those team scores, Oklahoma State and Iowa, it's a gigantic swap.
Yeah, it is.
It probably switch spots literally. So you got to win those bubble matches. Like that's especially the quarters because you automatically get 6th place points. You just got to make weight in the morning. So
my biggest concern is right now, David, I'm not sure who's even going to compete this next year. And, you know, everybody, you know, I think I gave Wyatt Hendrickson 20 points. I think he's probably going to be worst. 3rd again would be his worst. But then that was before I thought wait a minute, Trumbull's there. Trumbull's going to give him a really hard time because he can wrestle and he's really good at the funk and on the mat. And then you're going to have Bastida from Iowa State, who already beat him, who just didn't have a very good national tournament, was hurt, but didn't have a good national tournament. He could be in the finals. You got Gable possibly coming back. You know, I mean, there's a chance, you know, they may not score a lot of points at heavyweight compared to what we anticipate right now until we see what the lineups are.
yeah. And GT, I was talking to somebody about this. I don't think I've ever thought a team was going to win nationals for sure and not have any idea where half the guys in the lineup are going to go. And that's Penn State, right? Like we think Lillidow at 25, could be Braden Davis at 33, could be Nagao, 41, probably Bartlett, maybe Kasich, 49, probably Van Ness, maybe Kasich, 57, maybe Kasich, maybe somebody else. You know, maybe Levi Haynes, maybe Messenbrink comes down. 65, maybe Levi Haynes, maybe Messenbrink. 74, maybe Haynes, maybe Facundo. What's kind of weird is Josh Barr, who's never wrestled a match for them, feels like he's pretty much penciled in, and it feels like Starachi's going to move up, and it feels like, I mean, Kirkfleet's probably the one guy I think we know is going to wrestle what weight class he's at. But they got all these different permutations, and I think they score 120 points if they wrestle badly, right, Grant?
Well, I mean, what a problem to have, right? Like, hey, we can just plug and play and do whatever. And I think there's tons of other guys that are waiting in the wings to come back to the team, or like, you know, Shane Van Ness, and, you know, there's a whole bunch of other guys that have been
Facundo for sure, right?
Facundo, Barr. I mean, yeah, man, that's tough. I mean, it's
Mirasolas, yeah, like they got good problems.
Yeah, they got good problems. Now, I think what makes, and once again, to your point earlier about the 6th-year senior stuff and or transfers or whatever, what a bridge of like talent that Penn State's been able to achieve with basically getting like, Brooks and Starachi and Kirkfleet to like stick around and like be able to have, a bona fide hitter for one more year.
Yeah.
Right. And once again, as Kale and his staff have proven, they don't really miss on recruits all that often. And if they do, they pivot pretty well to being able to get somebody else pretty good pretty quickly. So I think that there's a lot to be said for a lot of these lineup shifts, especially at Penn State or any of the other programs that are like really super talented. Like, once again, I think we all know that Patrick Kennedy was probably wrestling a lot of undersized for a majority of his season this past year.
Yeah.
Still was extremely talented at that weight.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of different things that you can take from these scenarios that maybe, Trumbull's going to be undersized at heavyweight, but I bet you he's still going to be pretty dang good. Or, yeah, so like you just take all that stuff into consideration, but not knowing like, hey, this guy's solidified, like, hey, he's going to be a 25-pounder forever. Like Kirkfleet, he's going to be heavyweight. There's no doubts about it. Wyatt Henderson is going to be heavyweight. Colton Schultz is going to be a heavyweight. So like that plays into that world a little bit more, but all the other ones are kind of up for grabs on where those guys are going to falter to.
Well, the 25 for life thing, like, I mean, Iowa had done a good job of sort of scheduling their thing with Jessaroga, and then Ayala was going to go to 33, and then Jessaroga goes Navy SEALs, and, and now they got to adjust. So, by the way, I think Oklahoma State might be the new portal university. So, it was Michigan and Iowa, but Oklahoma State could start a portal kid at 25 with Spratley, 33 Cale Hughes is homegrown, 41 Jamison, portal, 49 Jordan Williams, Oklahoma kid, 57 if they go Cam Amin or Fish, portal, 65 the other guy's portal, 74 Hamidi's portal, and then 84 homegrown Plot, 97 big recruit Carroll or Serber homegrown, and heavyweight portal with Hendrickson. That's 6 portal guys. I don't think anybody else is starting 7 portal guys. And I don't think it's close. So super interesting, like how it kind of evolves, right? Like you didn't necessarily think of them as portal U. Michigan gets a lot of heat for that. The Iowa faithful think some people are upset they're not recruiting sort of on the front end. And I know like Tom Ryan was talking about that, but they're just spending their money on the front end. And it doesn't mean they didn't bid on these guys. They just didn't get them.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody kicks the tires on these guys. Like if Andrew Lears goes in the portal and you don't call about him, you're not a good coach. I mean, like you at least have to call and see, like, even if you need a 65-pounder, like, hey, is there any chance you want to bump up to 65? You have to ask. Like, you're crazy not to. So, okay, a couple of other things here. Anthony Ashnault gets hired at Princeton, and in a recruiting flip, which is not official till he signs, but Nick Sahakian from St. John Bosco, California, had committed to ASU and is now committed to Michigan. That's interesting because Michigan already had Jude Correa committed, who's going to be a heavyweight. And GT, perfect segue from what he said earlier, like Kirkfleet, like we know he's a heavyweight. Hendrickson, we know he's a heavyweight. So unless Correa is going to cut down to 97, you have 2 guys that are the same age. I think there's a chance that Correa may flip. So interesting to see there. Arizona State has had a great recruiting path from St. John Bosco. Has got a ton of kids out of there. So interesting to see that change. Cornell Robinson, who's the head coach of Wyoming Seminary, told me Correa is one of the 3 best folk style kids he's ever coached. And he's coached a lot of kids and a lot of good kids. So Michigan's either going to have first world problems or else, those guys are going to end up wrestling each other at different schools. So that's interesting to see. And Michigan is quietly challenging Minnesota for the title of heavyweight university with Kuhn and Paris. You got 2 Olympians. That's a pretty good start. You got KJ, who's, still a big guy that I'm sure can work out with those dudes and all those. And you got Sergey and everybody else. So a lot of things to kick around there. So let's talk a little bit about U20s and U23s because all right, can we all see this, boys?
Yep.
Okay. So the U20s and 23s are this weekend in Geneva, Ohio at the Spire Academy, correct, Grant?
Yep.
Okay. So by the way, the first weekend of June is one of the craziest weekends of the year because of Hall of Fame inductions for me personally, the Beat the Street Chicago Gala, and then U20s or 23s. So what you can see here is the guys that won the U.S. Open now sit to the finals. And this is like the old school one that the Kyle Dakes of the world had a big complaint about, where like they'd have to wrestle all day. Like I got to come through and try to win the tournament, and then Grant's sitting just waiting for me. Got a simulation match in the morning and a nice breakfast, and proper warm up and everything else. So it's a 2-day tournament, I believe. But the people sitting in U20s are Lillidow, Hughes, Bassett, Duke, Lockett, Ryder, Sinclair, Marisola, McDaniel, Jimmy Mullen. So we'll just kind of hit some highlights at 57. And I'm not going to mention the guy that's sitting like Lillidow going forward, but names for sure you've heard of: Leo DeLuca, Nathan Desmond, Seth Mendoza, Christian Castillo, Vinny Kilcarry, Anthony Knox, Jax Forrest. So Mendoza, Techfall, Jax at the U.S. Open. I'm not going to have you guys make picks. Are there any matches or any kids, like any matchups you guys want to see here? That, like, I'm interested to see any version of Jax, Knox, Mendoza, and who, if any of those three come out hitting Lillidow 2 out of 3.
Yeah, I'm really interested in Knox to see where he goes at this weight and how he performs, because he's so talented. So I'll tell you what, though, the guy from Ohio State, Kilcarry, is really, really good. I think he could be their starter this year, and he's had some, really good results in freestyle.
I can't believe you're not on the Leo DeLuca train, Mark.
I think he's too young right now.
Okay.
I don't see him beating some of these big boys yet, but I think he's going to be a good 25-pounder in the future.
GT, anybody here that sticks out to you, like just specific matches? Because we watched a few of these matches together in Vegas.
Yeah, I think nothing necessarily that you guys haven't discussed already. I think also Jax is probably the most, basically what he's done on the senior level.
Yeah,
kind of puts him at the lead here for if you're going to watch anybody as you watch through it. If you're just not necessarily, if you don't know anybody specifically, just watch his run and see who he basically meets in the quarters, the semis, the finals. If Jax were to make it all the way there, once again, I think that he's probably a favorite at this weight class, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're right? Like he beats Tomasello, makes the Olympic trials, has a great run. But also, I don't know how they're going to seed this tournament. I don't know if they're going to seed it on the pinpoint system, or if they're going to seed it off the U.S. Open. Because if they seed it off the U.S. Open, Jax didn't place. He didn't place in the top 8. So the best he can be is, the 9 seed, and then you take Lillidow out. The best he could be is the 8 seed, and if you're the 1 seed, Jax is the 8 seed. It's like a horrible quarterfinal draw. So it'll be interesting to see. I guess I spoke to Gary yesterday. I should have asked him how they were doing this tournament. So we'll find out when the seeds come out. Okay, GT.
David, I do have one question I wanted to get out there because I want the answer to it. And if anybody knows, it's going to be you and Grant, obviously. I'm not sure if it's U20s or U23s that if you placed at senior nationals in the top so many, you can claim that spot to go wrestle at the Worlds. Is that correct or incorrect?
That's been correct in the past. For example, there was one year when Yanni was trying to make the senior team and didn't make it. He could drop down to the U23 team. I don't know if that's the same in an Olympic year or not. So that'd have been a great question to ask us on Monday, Mark. So I could have got the answer instead of asking us on the air where we don't. So for future reference, try to give us 48 hours to get the answer instead of doing it right on the air for us.
But these guys are not wrestling for an Olympic year. This is for the Worlds, so that is going to be a little bit different. I'm not sure.
No, I'm not even saying it's different.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say it's different.
Okay.
GT, what do you know about it?
I mean, I don't think that anything necessarily would change. So, like, for instance, like if, I don't know, Peyton Jacobson is our Olympian, I think he also has first right of refusal at U23s if he falls within that category.
Now, so, Peyton, if he was the runner-up, if he was the runner-up, he would, at the Olympic trials, because he's not going to probably wrestle in the Olympics and then wrestle an age group. I mean, he can. Like, Amita Lord just does everything. But more likely scenario that he would take that spot, or at least historically where he had the criteria or the precedent to take that spot. So again, Mark, great question. Next time, give me 2 days.
Okay.
We try to educate people here and not look dumb. So that'd be great for us. Okay. All right. 61, Kyler Larkin, Fugit, Botello, Nasir Bailey, Cale Hughes is sitting, JJ McComas, Ben DeVino, Marcus Blaze. All right, GT. I'll just say this. I haven't seen Nasir Bailey wrestle freestyle in a couple years. I'm excited to see how he would wrestle versus some pretty high-level freestylers in like DeVino, Larkin, McComas, Blaze. I mean, a ton of – and Sergio Vega's in here too.
Yeah, this is a heavy hitter list right here.
Yes.
I mean, because like Corey Land, Cale Hughes.
Yes, I slept on Corey Land. He was beating Cale Hughes 8-0.
Yeah,
8.5-0. Had him halfway through on a gut to make it 10.
Pretty crazy. You know, like this is a pretty nasty weight class. It's pretty gnarly just from the standpoint of like there's a lot of like credentialing at this weight. And once again, I think you guys probably do a better job of like understand. Like I know some of these guys from the collegiate game, but I'm not necessarily as well in tuned with like the cadet junior, like on its way up, like the redshirt freshman. Like what did they all do this past year and stuff?
Yeah.
So this could be a big coming out party for somebody. Yes. That all of a sudden it's like, well, hey, you never really knew their name, or you kind of knew it a little bit, and then all of a sudden they have a great run where they beat somebody that you do know.
100%. That's true. And I will say this, I'm helping Beat the Streets New England put some matchups together for their fundraiser in late June. And a couple of these names are probably going to hit at that meet. Like we're talking to 4 or 5 of these guys right now. And we're just interested to see the results of this and who wrestled and who didn't. And Grant, you and I talked about Border Brawl. Like the beauty of Jax versus Larkin was we had never seen the match. And that's what people want to see is great guys and great girls wrestle or men and women, depending on the age. But ideally, people that haven't hit before. You know, if you and me are a 1-point match, we've already wrestled 6 times. Now, if it's 10-9 every time, nobody cares. If it's 3-2 every time, then nobody really wants to see it. So, Mark, any thoughts here before we jump to 65?
Well, I'm just looking forward to Bailey and maybe Blaze wrestling each other. I think that would be a phenomenal match.
And Bailey's the preseason number 2 at 133. So just thoughts there. 65, Manville, Bassett at Sitting, Zepeda, the last guy to beat Bassett, Lemley, Aiden Valencia. So not a lot of numbers here entered so far, but I will kind of keep it moving because we got 20 minutes to get through a bunch of weights. 70, Duke is sitting. Mantanona, Chalakian, Cody Rutledge is a hammer. Dylan Gilcher is a hammer. Tyler Kasich is a hammer. Cannon Webster is a hammer. Antrell Taylor is coming down from 165 to 157. No one's really talking about that, but this is 154, so he's definitely coming down next year. Should be an immediate impact guy. I would love to see Antrell Taylor wrestle Ja'Cory Teamer. Like just the scrambles in that match should be amazing. So thoughts, guys, here on 70?
I just think it's a really solid weight. I don't see any major favorites. If I had to pick somebody, I'd probably say Kasich, just because of what he was able to do at Division I Nationals this year. And you didn't expect it. Webster's a really good freestyler, so you know he's going to be in the hunt here.
K6 up to 70 kgs, GT. So maybe like that's 154, ladies and gentlemen. So maybe he's already doing the Penn State bulk job, and the move is to move him to 57.
Yeah, look at the crystal ball, just like, oh, well, he could be like, because it's just right in between, right? So it's 54. So he could be like not cutting at all, or it could be like he's cutting down. It's like, that's such a Penn State thing to like give us a little nugget for.
Give us a little taste, but not the whole meal.
Exactly. It's like, well, if you were to go up to 74 kilos, it's like, okay, that for sure is like he's gotten a lot bigger. This is just like, we'll see.
I think it does tell us he's not staying at 141.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of realized that would be a tough one for him to get back down there, especially like having as much time as he did at 49.
Yeah, but you just never know with those guys. They're so good at keeping things in-house. So, I mean, but that would have been 65 kgs. So that does tell us a little bit. Okay, 74. Cam Steed. So he may be going to 65 next year for Mizzou. Excuse me, with O'Toole moving up to 74. Joe Seeley, Mantanona, Vince Bouzakis, Ladarian Lockett is sitting. So, and again, there'll be more guys that are entered. This is as of Wednesday. We are recording a day early because Mark has train duties tomorrow. So 79, Zach Ryder sitting, Will Henkel, Noah Mulvaney, Gabe Arnold. It's probably the bigger names here. So Gabe Arnold, Zach Ryder would be an interesting rematch from a couple years ago, right, boys?
Yeah.
So
Mulvaney's awfully good too at freestyle. I think people are gonna probably sleep on him a little bit. He's pretty talented at freestyle.
he smashed his way through Fargo last year.
Yep.
So, yeah. All right, 86 kilos. Max McNelly, Tate Nocturburn. This will be good for Iowa State people to see. Ryder Rogotsky from Ohio State, Josh Barr, Aiden Sinclair, James Rowley. So another good weight, not like 14 hammers, but really, really, really good overall. At 92, Mirasola. There's only 4 guys entered here, 5 guys entered. The other Mirasola is at 97. Stephen Burrell is a name we've seen in these tournaments before. So here's probably the biggest one for me. Cody Merrill, who is committed to Oklahoma State, is down to 213. He's not very tall. Is there any chance we see Merrill get down to 197? Well, let's this meet. So, I mean, Merrill Mirasola, if that match happens, and then, Cam McDaniel, GT, like, I mean, I know you see these guys more in freestyle than Mark and I do. Those are some interesting matchups, right?
Yeah, I think because it's one of those weight classes where I think some of those guys are small heavyweights, or like where they can wrestle at the 97 kg mark because they're just not, all of 275 or 265, right? So it's like, it's a very interesting weight class, I think, internationally, because there is so many different body styles. And especially when you look at high school and or younger kids, you could have someone be 5'6" and you could have someone be 6'6" at that weight class. Yes. So I think it's a very diverse way to look at it. And I think also just from, Mirasola is a big, like, high school kid.
Yes.
I think, Cody Merrill, I think, is like more of like, he's a very big high school kid, but he's not like ripped up high school kid. So Correct. It's going to be interesting because I think Merrill could get bigger, but I think Mirasola could like pack on like Greg Kirkfleet size. Yeah. And just be a monster. So I think it's a very interesting weight class just on a matchup stylistically at that certain age group category. You just very similar to heavyweight. You do the exact same thing.
And you got you have literally a Cody Merrill at the same weight class. And again, different age groups right now, but next year will be in the same age group in college with an Isaac Trumbull. Heavyweight, Delegata, Aiden Atau, the previously mentioned Nicholas Sahakian, Jimmy Mullen is sitting, Coy Hopke, huge recruit. And then the Iowa boys, Bradley Hill and Ben Keeter. So that'll be interesting to see. U20 Greco's, the guy sitting, Cortez, Land. So Land is doubling up. Otto Black, Joel Adams, Brett Back, Aiden Ricks, McElhaney, Arian Khosravi, Nick Nosler, Sorian Herzog, Aiden Matau. We'll fly over here to U23 freestyle. These weights are freaking loaded. Vincent Robinson, Max Renneria, who had a really good win earlier this year. Steve O'Poulin, Brendan McCrone, Ethan Perryman, Trevor Anderson, Christian Forbes, Joey Cruz, Sam Smith. I mean, this just the pure numbers of this alone is like 40, 50 dudes at this weight class. So at this weight class, Mark and GT, no one is sitting. So that's the other thing. Like the likelihood, like if somebody coming from out of the pack and surprising us at U23s is much higher because they just got to win the bracket. The U20s, they got to win the bracket and then wrestle somebody fresh.
2 out of 3. Yeah.
Yeah. Greg Diakomahalis is in here as well. So again, if people, Mark, you kind of mentioned it, like this is where people can kind of pop out of the woodwork, right?
Yeah.
So we'll go through 61, just mention some names. Eli Griffin, Curtis Phipps, Dom Serrano is in here, Ethan Bergen's in here, Julian Farber from UNI is in here, Sam Herring, Jesse Ibarra, Drake Ayala, the previously mentioned Nick Bouzakis. All right, Mark, who wins Drake Ayala and Nick Bouzakis if they wrestle in freestyle?
Wow. I'm going to go with Ayala. I think his conditioning's just – you laugh, but his conditioning's phenomenal.
I don't laugh. I just said 100%.
When you laugh. I heard you laughing. Grant,
no,
I'm
not saying I'm not laughing. I'm just saying I knew 100% for sure that you would pick Ayala. GT, agree or disagree?
I think the sad thing I think about international or freestyle wrestling when it comes to those guys is like they're one trap arm away from
yes.
And I think one of the things that is extremely humbling about that particular style is that you can get tech and you're not that much. It could be a different match, right? So I think it's just the nature of the college game, like when they're that close to each other. But I do also think that I don't know what the other athletes are doing, but I do know that Drake was working tremendously over the past 3-4 weeks with Spencer in his run for, the Olympic trials. And then also to the last chance qualifier where he was basically a training partner for one of the Olympians for the United States. So that's going to pay a little bit of dividends to basically look, touch, and feel of freestyle wrestling specifically, and just that focus for that amount of time. So I may give an edge to Drake just from the standpoint that like he's not cutting as much weight and he's been focused on freestyle for the past month and a half and solely just that.
For sure. I get it. And the interesting thing was everybody a year ago was wondering if Drake and Spencer didn't like each other after the soldier salute. And what a great opportunity for Ayala to be over there at the last chance and all those other things. By the way, interesting to note, Anthony Noto is here, which is 134 pounds.
Yep.
So
is Unger from
yeah,
Unger.
but he's moving up because
he is. It's just fun to watch him to see what he can do at this weight also because he's a freestyler.
Yeah, I think more so like at least we knew he was going to go 33 with Greg D coming in. Like I don't know what Noto's going to do.
Yeah.
All right, 65, Ryan Jack, Colin Rath, Tyler Vasquez, Zeke Seltzer from Mizzou, Dylan Chappell, Dylan Phelps, Jacob Frost, Zach Redding, So Jacob Frost is wrestling. Cale Happel is wrestling. Eli Rocha. Andre Gonzalez is way up. He was like a 120 pounder coming out of high school.
Yep.
Julian Tagg, who's a really good freestyler. Just checking to see here if there's any other names that jump off the page. Just Wyatt Henson, Josh Saunders. So a lot of guys there. Not a ton of like, we think we know who's going to make the final, guys. 70, Ed Scott, Jackson Arrington, both Wolfpack Wrestling guys, 49 and 57 in college, meet in the middle at 154. So that's a really interesting potential matchup. I mean, they both probably got to, hopefully for their sake, they're seated on the opposite sides of the bracket. Jude Swisher's in here. Panero is in here. Okay, I may have to go back on I think Grant, the most he's ever laughed at me when the episode where I went off on my Panero needed to be number one.
So do you think Panero Johnson can win this weight, David?
That's a fair question. I mean,
I should have probably asked you that Monday, though, to give you time to think.
No, that's different than knowing rules, Mark. I mean, like I think
know, David. I was just kidding with you.
Listen, as our new guest host, just
Okay. I mean, I get invited back. Yeah, I should.
Yeah, I think there's just a bunch of guys here. There's nobody that you go, this dude is definitely way better than him in freestyle. I mean, I think the ring rust is probably the real thing, right, guys? Like, Ken wrestled a match in a year. Has he, Grant?
Is that Daniel Cardenas, All-American from Stanford?
Yeah, that is him. So he'd be the favorite for sure.
Yeah. I mean, once again, I also think that this is a tough tournament. Like, once again, I think when you see like names that jump off a page, like you're looking at maybe like Fargo results or like maybe even collegiate results, and then you're like fooled by it's like, well, I mean, you guys have coached guys that were absolutely atrocious at freestyle, that were amazing folk stylers.
And vice versa.
Yeah, or vice versa. It's like, well, hey, like that guy can't ride anybody to save his life and he can't get a takedown. Like, it's just a whole, like your parterre offense and defense could be completely different, right? So I think you will be surprised at who makes the quarters. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well then you start to figure it out. Like once you hit the semis, like that guy did not just wind up here. He's pretty good at freestyle and or whatever. So
yeah, it reminds me, I actually coached at this tournament a long time ago, and Mikey Benefiel, I was in his corner, and he won the quarters, semis, and finals, and he won. That was back when they pulled the ball out of the bag, to decide like the single leg clinch, and he won all three of those positions, and all three he was on defense. And what's funny is that's all we practiced pretty much besides that and edge of the mat stuff for the last 2 or 3 weeks, because they were just him and Duran were both just so good at wrestling that they didn't have to get better at wrestling. But those specific situations, like getting the shoulder out of the pocket, keeping the head down, just those things were like, and for people that don't remember, if Grant grabs my leg, if he gets the choice, he gets my leg, head outside single, he has to score. If he doesn't score, if there's no score, then the defensive wrestler wins. So, I mean, it was a huge advantage. I think it was probably 75, 80% of the time the offensive guy won. But that was back when the score was like sets in tennis, too. So, just some interesting things there. All right, 74 kilograms. Derek Gilcher.
Hunter Garvin.
Hunter Garvin, Bryce Andonian. Love watching Bryce Andonian in freestyle. I'm here for all of that. So, Ryder Downey. I'm trying to go between not missing anything and keeping it moving. Cale Swenson, Jagger Condamiti. '74 has just got a ton of dudes. 79. I don't see a ton of names popping off here, but Clayton Whiting, who's the Mizzou transfer, was the starter for most of the year for them.
Yep. Patrick Kennedy's in there.
So this is interesting. So 79 is 174. So the thought of him going down to 157 just clearly hasn't started yet, if that's even a thought.
Yep.
So, I mean, I guess the other option Iowa could do is Russell Kennedy at 74 and Gabe at 84. So Eric Gibson is in here. Tyler Lillard.
Yes, Brands isn't going to be wrestling this year.
I forgot about Brands. You're right.
I think Brands has got to be close to being not 23, boys.
No, he means from Iowa.
No, he was saying that maybe they'd move up.
Yeah, no, he's right. Mark's right. Yeah, because I mean, I think unless they wrestled, well, either way, they got 3 guys for 2 spots.
Yep.
So, yeah. See, Grant, the guest host, has some good points today.
Yes, he does.
Dylan Fish,
Grant.
86. Dylan Fishback, Colton Hawks, who ended up being the Mizzou starter at the end of the year. Reese Heller.
Once again, for everybody that's either watching and or listening, like this list is extensive. So like,
Yes.
like once again, apologize to anybody that we would have missed in the conversation, but like going through this amount of data, raw data, is hard to be able to conceptualize that quickly. So
Thank
it's like,
you,
oh,
Grant.
yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. That's just, those are big facts for sure.
David, you're doing a heck of a job.
Thank you. 92, Jack
How about
Derrick.
Munoz? Is that the Munoz I'm thinking of?
No, that's not Trey Munoz. It says Trent Munoz.
Yes, it's a brother.
I don't know, but it's 204 pounds. So
Oh, he's some weight. That's all right.
is that
From
right?
Beaver Dam. So that's what I was wondering.
Okay. Jack Dara, Cade Lout, Wyatt Volker. Let's see. Christian Carroll here. That's a big one that a lot of people are talking about. He's on his descent down.
Yep.
And I think people are kind of, here's Cardenas. He's got to be one of the favorites at this weight. I think people are sort of penciling Cardenas. I'm not sorry, Christian Carroll in. And Luke Serber is going to have something to say about that. He was not healthy last year. So, and he could give Christian Carroll problems, especially on top with his length. 97, Nick Stemmet. Again, trying to balance that out. GT, I appreciate the love, trying to explain like these lists. Jacob Bullock. There's just Seth Nitzel. Now we're up to heavyweight. So Bullock, Nitzel. I mean, there's got to be a 10 weight. Kirkfleet's in this meet?
Yes.
Kirkfleet and Nathan Taylor are in this meet. Wow. Okay. I'm going to pick Kirkfleet as the favorite in this meet. Greco's got a ton of guys too. I'm just making sure I don't miss anything. Okay. So no female matches at this tournament, which is interesting. So we can stop presenting.
And this is on Flow this weekend, David?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So couple last things. We are well aware of the ruling that came out about the ability for schools to directly pay athletes. As probably the biggest financial nerd on this show, it's not something we felt like we could address in 10 minutes. We really want to dig deep into it, talk about what the rules mean now and possible and probable ramifications. The one thing I will say is these rules were not made for wrestling, good or bad. They were made for football and to a certain extent men's basketball, and wrestling just has to live with those rules. So people need to understand that if they think it's good or bad, the NCAA don't care about wrestling when it comes to this money stuff. So also just want to publicly say I'm going to Beat the Street Chicago Gala this weekend. Those guys do an unbelievable job of not only raising the money, but their executive director, Mike Powell, doesn't even take a salary. So vast majority of that money, besides some advertising costs, are going to the kids and coaching staff and things like that. I'm proud to be an honorary board member there alongside Ben Ostrander, Mark. So
Yeah.
I will see Ben, and Ben says that Tanner Utley is going to be with them up there this weekend. So get to see the Fort Dodge boys. GT is going to be on his way to Stillwater for the National Wrestling Hall of Fame inductions, specifically there for Tanaka Hata, who at the end of AAPI month is one of the legends as a Japanese American, was one of my heroes growing up. Uitaki was probably my dad's favorite wrestler growing up. And so Hata was kind enough. Grant, I think a year or two ago, you gave me Hata's number and he came on and did the podcast. And that podcast may have meant more to me than a lot of the other people watching it, because just when he talked about growing up and some of the things that he had gone through, those stories resonated with me, being very similar to my dad's. GT and I talked about this last week, Mark, but I think, we're all blessed to be able to do this podcast and literally just have these conversations on the air that we enjoy. And so wanted to, again, before we hit June, just thank USA Wrestling, Gary Abbott, Rich Bender, those guys specifically. So GT and I mentioned it last week. Mark, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but please feel free.
Yeah, I think, everything you're doing, David, for wrestling in the United States has been impressive since day one. And you do it to improve the sport. And that's really kind of a unique thing these days, is because usually people do it to lift their egos and things like that. You do it to make the sport better. So I appreciate that, and something that you do. And, it's just that wrestling's all over the universe. It's one of the oldest sports known to man. So, it's nice to represent every culture that is involved in the sport.
For sure. I appreciate the kind words. GT was kind enough to send me a text while we were talking. U20 and 23 women's trials were the ones that were in Spokane. So those happened in April. Okay. So I figured they were either before or after, and I knew that meet. I just didn't know which specific age groups were wrestled out there. But I know that meet is in the separate category of men and women is an absolute, like, if we read through all those names, it's just as deep in terms of, athletes with superstar credentials. So depending on where you are this weekend, get on and watch those matches. Going to be, especially if you're a college wrestling fan, which is how this podcast started, you will see your future athletes if you're rooting for XYZ team. So that meet should be absolute banger. And again, quick shout out to Beat the Street Chicago. I know Beat the Streets New England is running an event in June that I'm going to be a part of. We'll talk about that later. GT, enjoy Stillwater. I'm sure you'll just sit with David Taylor and he'll just tell you everything on the air that we need to know for next week. So just completely full disclosure, I'm sure, right?
100%. I'll do that.
Just walk in with the recorder. Like, I was talking to somebody the other day that said they remembered my dad when he was coaching and that he used to talk into a tape recorder. And then GT, you and I talked about that when you were at the Life University Open, that all your coaches had notebooks, or tablets, whatever the right word is, but paper, pen and paper, and that you guys would take notes on guys that were wrestling, and which is really smart, because you start watching 100 matches in a day and one thing bleeds into the other. So maybe if not, we'll sneak Coach Ron down there to get some recordings of the conversation. So
love that.
All right, for Grant. And Grant, I think we're going to keep this guy, this Ostrander guy. I think he's going to do a good job.
I think so too.
Brings a lot of wisdom.
Yeah.
Some glasses.
Some great questions too.
Great questions. Perfect timing. All right. For the boys, I'm David. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll speak to y'all next week.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
See you, brother.
See ya.